Hi, Galia. Welcome to Venture with Grace today.
Hi, Grace. Pleasure to be here.
You are one of the leading characters in like Israel fintech world. I would love to for you to start with, for the audience who don't know you and teammate, why don't we start with um, your journey from maybe leading Eastern Europe at PayPal to where you are now at TMA.
Sure. So, funny enough, actually, my journey started in a completely different direction. I started off being a lawyer, but then saw the light and kind of moved on to the business side and to fintech. And I've been in fintech for the past decade or so. So, spent a couple of years at PayPal running mostly emerging markets. So, actually, a lot of time in Africa, which was just so much fun and really exciting to see the power of fintech and the impact over there. And then also Eastern Europe and Israel. And my focus there was really kind of business development and product innovation, always tasked with growing the numbers, but given the product availability of PayPal in the different regions, we needed to be very, very creative. And so I kind of reference my time at PayPal as being an entrepreneur, if you will, within PayPal and kind of building new business and new partnerships. And at some point, I had to follow my heart and say, let's jump ship and go into real entrepreneurship. And this is when I joined Teammate, which at the time was a venture creation shop focused on cyber. And I kind of joined to expand the expertise into fintech with far more talented people than myself. And I've been at it ever since. So the group has fairly evolved. So maybe just to give you a bit more context about Teammate. So Teammate is a venture creation as well as venture capital fund. Currently with 1 billion of assets under management. We've been around since 2014. So we have our 10th anniversary this year, which is exciting. And we pride ourselves with being very collaborative with the market. So I think at the kind of core of Teammate lies the understanding that there is room for innovation in venture capital, where you still see a lot of companies failing, which means that there's so much that needs to be done to really build a strong company. And so what we're focused here at Teammate is increasing probability of success. And so we've built the venture creation model, which entails very close relationships with the market, making sure that we kind of build a thesis about where the opportunities are, where the market is going, what are the problems that need to be addressed. An unfair advantage when it comes to accessing very strong talent. And once we have a strong, validated thesis, we partner with founders. We support them as an investor, and as somewhat of a co-founder in the company through the large platform team that we have here, which amounts to about 90 people. So we kind of have a startup as a service platform, if you will, and our day-to-day is focused on how can we increase probability of success for the companies. So I'm happy to say that we have 40 companies in our portfolio. We're focused on cyber, fintech, data, and digital health. And we've had 9 exits up until today.
Mm. Wow, that's pretty high. That's like every one of four company there's like an exit basically. I wonder when you guys pick these general categories, why do you feel like those category matter in like a sense of like both innovation and financial sense? Since like I know that you guys both invest and co-fund team with people or like put together teams. Like so in America, a lot of people would consider this as a part of like a venture studio, but since you guys are very hands-on on like building it with people and putting teams together throughout the journey, I wonder, can you maybe walk us through of like a deal that you have worked on from when you realizing this is a really amazing idea to putting together the team? Like how do you guys pull people from different part of like like that ecosystem to putting together the team, and then what were like the challenges that you guys would be facing and eventually having an exit?
Yeah. Ooh, a lot to unfold here. um, So first, I'll start by saying, we started off from we as a group at Teammate started off from cyber, just because the founders of Teammate came from the cyber world. Nadav Tzafir was the commander of 8200, which is the largest intelligence unit in the Israeli Defense Force, and part of the reason why Israel is referenced many times as a startup nation has to do with a lot of the magic that's happening in this unit in particular. And so this is kind of the domain expertise we started off with. And as we grew the team, we started adding on more domain expertise where we thought we could dramatically increase probability of success, right? This is really kind of our business. And so we tend to try to innovate in industries that are very complex, that require a lot of depth and expertise, where you need to spend a good couple of decades in an industry to really kind of understand where the problems are, to really start the journey appropriately. And so this is why we expanded into fintech, and then later on also into digital health. And actually, we kind of see a lot of the magic happening in between those domains. So at the intersection of cyber and fintech, a lot of need. At the intersection of fintech and digital health, and of course, cyber and digital health. So that's kind of the general reason for the domains. Now there are many different ways through which we can start a company, right? So it can be us developing a thesis very deeply. We would research an area, say like fraud or cross-border trade. Look for all the different opportunities to really disrupt the market. And as we get more convicted, really kind of go and look for the most relevant founders to join this journey and kind of lead the company. At the other side of the scale, we could very well partner with entrepreneurs that have researched a domain very deeply and come with a passion and a problem that they want to solve and tackle. And we would support them in this journey. And to be honest, anything in between, right? So I did mention our close village, our close network of enterprise partners. So many times the need and the domain and the pain comes from them. And as the problem is surfaced and we start having an understanding that this is a recurring problem and we can build a big company out of that, we would go ahead and do it. And we've even had examples of kind of tapping into academia and taking, technologies that were developed there and try to commercialize it. So however we started, once we have a thesis and a team and a strong enough conviction, we kind of kick off our company building process, which is a gradual process where we try to be very diligent, and we try to kind of have a bit of a methodology as to how how we impact the journey of the company, starting with a very long period of time where we focus just on the problem. We don't talk about the solution. We just make sure we understand the problem from every different direction possible. Once we've concluded that phase, we will go into the solution and validate the solution quite dramatically, and then on also to the go-to-market side of it. And this process in itself is a very, very collaborative process where we try to engage with the market, with experts, with our village on an ongoing basis to make sure that we kind of minimize the need for pivots, and we just have a really great access to what the market is seeing as the right solution and how will it be adopted. And this is kind of how we go about this. So maybe I can share a more concrete example of a company that we built called 40Cs that's focused on cross-border trade. And we started this just looking very broadly at where the opportunities are, and this is a multi-trillion market, very old school in many of the way that the trade is being conducted, super offline. And we came to realize that there's a very big problem around trust, especially when you're talking about international players. And there's a need to find a way to bridge the lack of trust, because the lack of trust results in very strict payment terms, missed business opportunities, and just kind of a working capital constraint. And so we built 40Cs to start and kind of tackle this opportunity. And they've launched, a fantastic product that allows suppliers to incorporate payment, online payment, and payment terms, and kind of streamline a lot of the workflows between the supplier and the buyer, and through that, just streamline the experience dramatically. And so today, the company is performing fantastically. They actually partnered with Zim, which is one of the largest shipment companies, and a close partner of Teammate. And Zim became, a go-to-market partner, but also an investor in the company, but also provided, a credit facility that gives the company a lot of bandwidth to grow their business.
That's super interesting. And I want to tap into like couple points that you just mentioned. Like one is about having a close quote unquote village around you. So like meaning like the entrepreneurs at some maybe bigger companies. And we've seen this happening in Silicon Valley as well. A lot of times like when a group of people like coming out of a big company, their angel group within the company just invest in them. And I wonder, like, when you, and then one of the things that you mentioned was like you will study the problem first instead of like having a solution. And you also mentioned that like one of the ways to put together the team is like to having, let's say, maybe like taking something very academic, technical to maybe build a business around it or like commercialize it to a degree. I wonder when you're thinking about, because I live in the Bay Area, I've seen a lot of people coming out of the schools here, like Stanford or Berkeley. They're like, let's say they have a really good technical, um, like maybe technical advancement of something or technical innovation to a degree. How do you select the people to be together to build something more commercialized? We can see like ChatGPT obviously is very successful at that, but there's a lot of companies that are acquired a lot of amazing talent that are technical but are not able to create like a product that's used by millions, right? So I wonder, how do you select the what specific like technical thing that you would be developing onto like something commercialized? And is there like any certain type of patterns that you would see that make something like that successful?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I will say we've only done this once, so I'm not sure I'm able to talk about a pattern. But I think generally speaking, there's so much innovation happening in universities where you have the liberty of researching for the sole purpose of research, and you're not really thinking with a business set. And I think where we can find opportunities to see how a specific technology can revolutionize a market, this is where really the opportunity lies. But you asked also another question, which is how do you select the team? And I think
Mhm,
if you're in the business of early stage investing or company building for that matter, I would say, you're in the business of people
mhm,
and you invest first and foremost in people and you
mhm,
partner first and foremost with people. And so
mhm,
having the ability to evaluate the team, to get a sense of how are they going to perform under stress, which is always part of the journey. Do they share the same values? Are they together a stronger team? What type of company do they want to build? What type of culture do they want to have in the company? All of those are important, very important, values to evaluate. And I think it's much more important than the specific idea, because we all know that ideas tend to evolve through the
mhm,
journey. And as much research that you do, markets change, dynamics change, interests change, and so you need to adapt to that. So finding founders that are extremely passionate about the journey, that want to build a very big company, that have the right culture, that have the right considerations, and that are resilient enough to I don't want to say survive, but to be able to go through this process, through the ups and the downs. This is where we spend a lot of our time. And I also quite generally tell entrepreneurs in the early days, you guys need to evaluate your VC partners, whether you choose to work with Teammate or the specific partner that you work with, because the VC that invests in you, especially in the early days, they're your partner. Many times they will be around even longer than the actual co-founder in the company, right? So making sure that you have the right chemistry, making sure that you think you can derive the right value and from the collaboration with the VC, those are super important things that entrepreneurs need to spend time thinking about. And I think it was probably a lot easier to do that in the high times of 2021 where money was not an issue. Maybe entrepreneurs think that it's a little bit harder to do nowadays, but I still think it's worthwhile to do it, and just making sure you have the right chemistry with the investor as well.
Mm. When you mentioned like the chemistry with the right investor, like what, like, just being good friends with somebody may not make it an effective partnership, or being like, how do you kind of like examine the characters for each person? Besides, like, the common way would be like talking to some people on their portfolio company, but the portfolio company you can see on their website is probably their best friends to a degree. So I wonder how, like, if you're a entrepreneur today, like when you're picking investors, how do you go about it? And then also, there's not a lot people can pick, as like, it's not like, as you mentioned, like it's not like 2021 anymore, like it's not money flying around. So like when people get an investor, I feel like people tend to just be like, let's take the money for now. How do you like evaluate these kind of opportunity that like you finally received after? It's sort of like picking a job, right? Like there's like, let's say you only got one job offer, it's not like you have a lot of like capacity to turn them down or something because there's no other offers on the table. How would you create either other offer for yourself, or like try to pursue the right partner for you?
Yeah. So very, very good questions. I'll start maybe with the final question, which is, I think many times I've seen founders get tempted to take like the best term sheet that they have on the table, right? I mean, of course, if you only have one term sheet and your back is against the wall, then take the money, or find a way to bootstrap a little longer up until you have better results and you can get more conviction from other investors. But when you do have an alternative, I would definitely recommend choosing the right investor over the best deal, right? Because again, the investor that you partner with, particularly in the early stage, I think down the line the relationships tend to be slightly different. This person will be with you for the years to come, and so it's really not like a job, because a job you can at the end of the day live it and look for something else. But in the type of relationship, when you're committing to a new venture, you're going to be around for many, many years, I hope at least. So I think you need to make sure you choose the right person. And how do you DD that person? I expect founders that consider working with me to do as much due diligence on me as I do on them. And so I'm happy to facilitate some introductions, but go find the right connections. I mean, you need to be resourceful, and ask around, and try to get an understanding of what's the good and what's the bad, because there's always good and there's always bad, and make sure that it's a good fit for yourself. And I think at the end of the day, I measure people, just in general collaboration, by value, right? I think
Mhm.
our only currency in life is value. I want to be measured by value, and I want to measure other people by value. And so I think you need to understand, as you said, it's not just about being good friends and enjoying grabbing a drink together, but it's about the value that you think an investor can bring to you, how they will be impactful in the journey, in and how will they react when things are slightly less good. How for instance, always try to be a few steps ahead of the company in just kind of understanding the potential risks and the dilemmas, and kind of being that person that you can brainstorm with about not always just the day to day, but like, where is the company going, what are the opportunities, how is the market changing, and just be a great sounding board. So the very basic, I think, from an investor is help me with my go-to market. I think every VC does that by now. Some do it better than others. I know, for us at Teammate, it's not just a casual intro here and there. We stand behind, dozens of design partners and are super, super active and involved. And this is extremely important. But again, this is the basic. I think you need to think about the additional values that this relationship with your investor as an entrepreneur can bring to the table.
Mm. So, like as you mentioned, like the partnerships are very important. So, in the past, before you joined Teammate, you were at PayPal and you were the head of sales and market development of Eastern Europe. And before that, it was yeah, like I believe Asia as well. But like, oh well, South
Africa.
Africa. Yeah, yeah, sorry. Like, so I wonder, what were some lessons that you've learned early on in your career that you kind of took it while you were, building the team at Teammate?
Wow. First of all, my time at PayPal was just amazing.
Mhm,
Working for a big corporate and then doing, working on Africa, which is not at the core focus of PayPal. Some may see this as a disadvantage. I actually saw it as an advantage because it was like the perfect, playground for me. I could do whatever I wanted, and things I would probably wouldn't be able to do in more established markets. So I think I learned a few things. First, just I learned generally this is where I fell in love with fintech and the impact of financial inclusion and what does it mean to be part of a market or part of a community where you don't have access to the things that you and I, Grace, just take it for granted.
mhm,
Credit card, being able to pay online, being able to shop online, not carrying cash all around, being able to take a loan, all of those things I presume at least, can access pretty easily. But there are some parts of the world where you can't, right? And so
mhm,
just for me, just seeing the level of how deep the gap is between developed markets and underdeveloped markets was quite impactful. And kind of drew my desire and passion to stay in fintech. On the other side, though, I will say, in many aspects,
mhm,
there are some things that are far more developed in those markets than they are, in the United States or in Europe. Just giving you an example, and I'm taking you back like a good 10 years ago or 9 years ago. I was working in Kenya, and in Kenya, there's a product called M-Pesa, which is a mobile wallet that works on the simplest of feature phones. And just to put this in perspective, about 50% of Kenya's GDP back then was flying on M-Pesa. And you could back then pay tuition, pay for your gas, pay for your friends, transfer, any type of electronic transaction. You could do it. And we did not have this yet fully operational in the States at the time, right? And so I think that there's also a lot of very good lessons to be learned about what necessity and how necessity can impact innovation. And really, M-Pesa was born out of necessity because Kenya was a cash-based market, and so you had to find a way. And cash is expensive and it's risky, so you had to find a way to leapfrog because people did not have bank accounts, and this is where this product was developed. So that's one kind of important learning. The second, I think, for me, was actually about storytelling. Um,
mhm,
you know, I'm painting beautiful colors, but getting PayPal to move and, for instance, to partner with M-Pesa, which is a telco or a financial service by a telco in Kenya, um, was really not easy. And
mhm,
I didn't have a lot going for me. And so I had to find a way to be romantic and just to kind of drive the passion and encourage people to see the mission and find the resources and the time to walk the walk together with me and drive the impact. And it took me a good 3.5 years to pull it off, right? And just going back to entrepreneurs and to today, I still value storytelling as probably one of the most important traits that founders, especially on the go-to-market side, but not only, need to have, right? To be able to tell a good story, find a way to connect with people. I think that is super important and definitely something I've taken with me.
I want to double click on like what were the story you were telling the people at Kenya. I know you mentioned like show passion, but can you describe like what were you telling to who too? So because it sounds like, you open up a new market for PayPal in Africa. Like you mentioned, it's like leapfrog in terms of technology. People don't have bank account, but this is like kind of based on that. And I wonder, how do you, I guess, like, what were the story you were telling, and how do you like go to a market to just quickly establish yourself in the ecosystem within 3 years to build a product on top of it?
Yeah. So we did have a little bit of an activity in Kenya at PayPal back then, but just we didn't support the local currency. We're not connected to any local systems, and so it wasn't just very practical. And so I think what I had to do is to find a way to connect the PayPal wallet with the M-Pesa wallet, and just allow money transfer, and through that really kind of open up the market. So I won't geek out too much because I can talk fintech and details a lot, but this is essentially what I was trying to do. And the big problem that I had is that I had no development resources. So how do I introduce a new product functionality without any resources? And so the secret there for me was just to find the resources to introduce a partnership and just do it with a third party that they would be able to do the heavy lifting. So the story was about how do I get availability to resources to bring the promise of PayPal. And I had one good thing or two good things going for me. Africa
Mhm,
is interesting. People just intuitively are like, what can we do, and how can we help?
mhm,
And the second is PayPal's mission, which
mhm,
is about financial inclusion. And so I think the narrative that I started to build there was, guys, we can't only do financial inclusion in the States, right? Like,
mhm,
we're an international market, we're operating in 100 plus markets, dozens of currencies and so on. Let's bring the promise outside. And so I think the story was compelling in itself, but when I found a way to de-risk, and not to require a lot of resources, just working through a third
mhm,
party and having them do the work, I was able to finally kind of get the bandwidth and the attention. And I was just catching up with a friend from PayPal the other day,
mhm,
and I haven't been around for 4.5 years now, and he still mentioned that this is like a flagship, partnership, one that people still talk about as like an example of how to do great things at PayPal. So, for me, this is obviously great, but it's amazing just to see the impact. And once you understand, how, I wouldn't say easily, but how impactful you can be in changing people's life. For me, this is just drove the passion, and the adoption of the product was unbelievable. It, like, you could immediately see the impact. People were waiting for it, because if you think about this, people in Kenya that only had cash or M-Pesa could not buy online. They couldn't
mhm,
buy from Wish or from Alibaba or from wherever, and just depriving them of this ability just deepens the gap, right? Because products, there's more, more availability for products, better prices, and so on. So I think there was kind of a compelling story. How can you open up Kenya to the market? And again, this is one example. I did a few of those partnerships back then, so
mhm.
great times.
I wonder, I have two questions on that end. Like, one is, when you were telling a story, like, essentially, like, a lot of the BD early stages telling a story, but essentially, like, in the end, it have to become sales, meaning sometimes like numbers you can't really bypass, like to dedicate like, oh, here's like X amount of benefit I could do for you type things. I wonder, like, how do you kind of seal the deal or close the deal with like that? And then the other one's like, how do you really develop like a strategy for this? You mentioned like you guys were using third parties, and like, how do you even know what third party to use? And I feel like there is as someone coming from abroad, so I was an international student when I moved to America. I was it was my first time like working here too, so there was a lot of BD going on there for my past work. So I think there's like a couple challenges. One is like the culture challenge, as like you have to quickly immerse yourself within the ecosystem, but like chatting with everybody else who works in this country. And like to understand their culture, because doing business, like, in America there is a lot of third party going on, but let's say from another country, it could be like, oh, everything in house, like every dollar counts, every, like, like a coffee mug count is like a part of your expense or something. But in America, maybe everything was, like, outsourced from somewhere else. And I wonder, the other part is, you know like, how do you learn about the business side of things too? Because, like, how, like, number one is like the culture, also how they do business, right? Like, what they value, what they don't value. The other part is like the business itself, like, how do you know, how are things traditionally been done? I know that you were working in BDM from like other companies before, but, like, how do you kind of educate yourself on like what's going to happen to push business forward?
This is a brilliant question. And I'll say two things. And it kind of ties back to what I said about investing in people.
Hmm.
You do business with people.
Hmm.
You need to understand people. You need to spend the time to get to know people. You need to spend the time to understand their incentive, right? If you want to form a partnership with anyone in your
Hmm.
personal life, business, or wherever, you need, I mean, at least that's my approach. You need to create a win-win situation. And so for me, many times, it was about really understanding the person in front of me on his personal level. What does he need to bring to the table to show success to his boss? And once you get an understanding of that and you get a little bit personal, and this, of course, changes from one culture to another, there are obviously differences there, but you can start forming a great partnership, which really results in, good for both parties.
Hmm.
And that has been, I think, the truth in any partnership, in any product, in any BD effort that I've done up until today. And I think it remains true for what we do today here at Teammate as well, which is, you want to partner with a design partner. How do you
Hmm.
create a win-win situation, right?
Hmm.
And it's about understanding their pain, and it's about understanding how you can help bring value, but it has to be in a way that is valuable for you. I was talking to a company the other day, and there's always this dilemma in the early days of a company. You have like a big company that comes to you, a big customer that comes to you and says, well, I want a partner, but I need this and this and this and this and this and that. And it's a real dilemma because you're super early and there's a fantastic logo you can add on, but the risk there is you end up building a product for a specific company as opposed to building out the vision that you have. And so it's kind of this ongoing tension of listening to the market, listening to what customers actually tell you that they need, even if this means changing from your original plan. But it's also about making sure you're focused on what you want to do, and this is something that's repetitive. And I
Hmm.
think the first part of your question, which is how do you even know where to go, I think it's a lot about being able to zoom in and zoom out constantly. And this is a skill that I think is super important for founders, for investors. I would say almost for everyone, right? We many times get so kind of we drown with the different day-to-day tasks that we need to do. But having the skill of zooming out for a second or a few minutes, looking at how the market is changing, looking at where opportunities are being created right now, and being able to have enough bandwidth to see it and capture it. This is something that is super important. And remember, the hard truth is, I was hired to grow the numbers in Africa or in Eastern Europe for that matter. However, the product that I had did not connect to the local system, right? So, faced with a limitation, a very serious limitation, you have to be creative and find a way to just open up the market and become relevant. And I think this is a challenge that you kind of constantly need to do in your entrepreneurship journey, whether you're a founder of a company or working within a larger organization. You always need to find a way to kind of overcome those hurdles.
Mm, totally. I want to switch gear a little bit. Because one of your focus area in like fintech is fraud and payment. And what are some like key trends in like you see in emerging areas like fraud prevention and um, basically what are some opportunities that will coming out of this innovation in the payment space as when you're looking at startups, what are the opportunities and what are like how does a I guess like the other part is like how does a business flow in this sector, like where does the money come from, where does it go to, and where do you see opportunity in general?
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny, we did a research, as kind of founders ourselves and as very active investors. We always to try to understand where the market is going, and so you know you try to do two things: analyze what happened in the past, what worked, what didn't work, and what's changing right now in the market, and then the connection of the two can generate opportunities. So we researched fintech unicorns
Mhm.
in the past couple of years to see um, which one succeeded, which one didn't succeed. And so, first of all, what we learned is one out of every five unicorns in the world is fintech. And this
Mm,
is second to enterprise technologies and cyber, where it's really kind of 30% of the world's unicorn, which belong to that sector. So there's a lot of great fintech businesses. And then we started kind of, cutting this into smaller pieces, and looking at the different sub verticals within fintech and how long it took companies to become a unicorn. So we saw a few interesting things. First, we saw that out of the companies that received funding in seed funding in fintech, only 30% managed to raise an A round. Just goes to show you, how hard it is to actually reach the unicorn. And then what we saw is that on average, it takes just shy of 6 years to become a fintech unicorn. Looking at the subsegments, we saw that insurtech is actually one of the fastest areas where you can become a unicorn, while capital markets and wealth management is actually one of the slowest, right? One of the longest journey. And then we saw payments. So payments is actually accountable for about 30% of fintech unicorns. So it's pretty substantial. But it takes about 6.7 years to become a payment unicorn. And if you start kind of, looking at payments and why it takes a longer time to become a unicorn, but still a lot of founders actually go into that space, it has to do with the fact that um, the margins in payments are super low and continuously go down, and you just need a lot of volumes to generate substantial revenues. Once you get there, because you have so much customers to generate all of these volumes, then you get a pretty solid and strong business. And so although it takes time to get there, I think you can build fantastic companies out of that. But in payments also, you see a lot of changes that are starting to happen, right? Take the example of faster payments, FedNow, RTP, the whole immediate payment kind of sector, which bears a lot of promise and requires innovation and new connections, and will potentially also impact fraud, because once transactions are immediate and you can't reverse them, then fraud becomes much more painful. So this is what we saw kind of in the look back. But now I think, when we're looking at the future, we need to understand what's changing in the market. And in the market, we see, I think, a few interesting trends, right? So first, generative AI. Sorry, I have to
mhm,
reference it, which is really kind of changing the pace of innovation more than anything else, right?
mhm,
Um, and you see somewhat of a democratization of fintech, because with the trends of open banking, open finance, API economy, embedded finance, all of those are essentially kind of breaking down the different elements of fintech and allowing just for faster development of fintech propositions. And so it's kind of lowering the barrier of entry into fintech and allowing the big players also to pretty rapidly introduce new capabilities. I think
mhm,
we're also seeing, as I mentioned, fraud that's definitely on the rise.
mhm,
Again, if you couple fraud with generative AI, then you see that the cost of generating fraud right now is going down, while we're more connected, we have more devices, so there are more touch points where you can introduce fraud. And you also see fraud kind of going down to the weakest link, which is the individual, the least protected, right? And so I think there's a lot of room to innovate there and to see how can you actually actually protect users. So generally, I think a lot of super interesting things that are happening. As mentioned, we try to spend our time a lot at the intersections of fintech and cyber and fintech and digital health. So definitely passionate about what's happening in fraud, but also healthcare and fintech. Just such a broken system in the States, unfortunately, that while will not be solved by fintech, it can definitely fintech can be a significant player in reducing cost of healthcare, in increasing coverage, in increasing availability, in streamlining a lot of the kind of operational and administrative aspects of it. And so just a lot of opportunity to innovate there.
Mm. Wow, this is a lot to definitely a lot to like unpack there. So there I took so much notes. I don't even know where to start. I wonder like, I want to go back to what you said early on a little bit about like you guys studied all the fintech unicorns on like, how long it took them to IPO and how many failed and how many raised Series A. Wow, those are like really interesting to look at. And I wonder when you are studying these basically big unicorns or like what do you identify as a unicorn? Do you study like in America or in the world in general? And um I guess like what are some insight you found along these numbers, right? Like because I feel like for example when you say let's say it took 6 or 7 years for a payment company to become a unicorn. I don't know if it's because of like the year also kind of shift towards like in a different zone. Like in the past it's easier to for a company to like IPO, but like now I think like company took a lot longer to go public because there's a lot of like private capital going on. And like I wonder um like what are some insights that you found throughout studying the number towards these fintech unicorns, and then how do you study them? Like is there any specific tools you guys use, or is there like just like by observing, like basically having an Excel sheet pull data from the internet, or if there's like like internal tools? Like I mean we don't have to go into like detail if it's private, but like I want to understand like the general sense of like how to kind of study these public trends.
So so a few things. First of all, when we talk about unicorn, we're not talking about IPO. We're talking about private companies that have reached a 1 billion valuation.
Mhm.
So that just to be accurate there, and I think you know I think it goes back to the basics. How we do it, just a lot of hard work.
Mhm.
We want to be in a position where we bring the very best companies into the market. And we want to bring this as value to our founders. And
Mhm.
so we proactively think about what are the assets that we can develop that will help founders in the early days focus on the right things.
Mhm.
And so I think it's super important in that context to provide them with, a navigation map, which
Mhm.
is, well, dude, if you're going in, capital markets, this is the opportunity, this is the size of the market, but just know this is going to be a long journey. So maybe this needs to influence how much money you're going to raise at this point or how much money you're going to spend. And so those are, I think, super important elements that we want to be in a position to provide our founders. And so this is kind of why we're doing it, and the how is no secret sauce. There are a lot of different systems and analysis. I think what we saw that could be potentially interesting, other than just the different time that it takes, and those are averages, right? So you have great companies that took far longer than that. So it's just kind of somewhat of a benchmark. But we saw that actually the business model has an impact. So whether you are B2C or B2B, it's a different trajectory for you as a company. And it makes sense, right? I mean, I don't think that it's super surprising. What we're also seeing is and this is forward looking. If you look at 2023, for instance, you see that the lion's share of the fintech dollars that were invested went into B2B. And this is like a significant uptick from 2022. So I think if you look at kind of where the industry is going right now, many times we're asked, who's going to win? Is it going to
Mm,
be the fintechs? Is it going to be the banks, the insurance companies? Is it going to be Apple and Google and the big techs? I'm one to think that we're going to have winners and losers of all categories. But what for sure, what's not going to change is we will remain with these three types of players existent in the market. And in times of I guess, changes and macroeconomics complexity, what may change is the role that those players are playing, right? So take a look, for instance, at banks. Banks felt the threat of fintechs and wanted to stay relevant. And so they
mhm,
developed a banking as a service model, which allowed them to power fintechs and allow fintechs to do what they do good, which is user experience, for instance, but still be part of those transactions.
mhm,
And I think, in the years to come, because of generative AI, that's putting, I think, more power in the hands of established companies that have customers and trust, but more particularly have just a lot of data they can play around with. I think we're going to see gradually a shift, um, and an emphasis to B2B startups that are helping the banks to do better with what they do. And of course, I'm not trying to say that there's no room for, B2C startups, but I think there's a great kind of collaboration opportunity. And this is also evident by just, where the money is flowing right now in the industry.
Wow. I want to learn more about like, okay, so yesterday we had the founder of Republic came onto our show. So basically Republic is like democratizing um investments in like the private market, or like their goal is to like trying to become the platform for everyone to use to buy any kind of financial product. I've seen like in because I live in Silicon Valley, so there is the AngelList of the world where people could purchase private company stake on a platform. So like I don't know if this is belong to like the wealth management, as you mentioned. It's like one of the longest time to having a longest time to become like a unicorn. I wonder how do you see the innovation of this category? I also see that there's a lot of innovation in the family office LP investment into startup in general. So like I know this is a very subsector of something fintech, but I wonder what's your thought on like innovation in this space? And if you're, let's say, instead of like, because Team 8 is Israel based and you guys invest and kind of like partner with team from Israel to kind of like create product globally. How do you create product globally from a place and without like hiring having a lot of like talent acquisition cost globally? And the other part of the question is like I personally, just because maybe I live in a little bubble, like I've seen this like movement of like people creating platforms to connect like let's say GPLPs, or like making venture capital mainstream to a degree. What's your thought on like maybe startups in this area? Like what are the challenges for them to become big, or what are things that you would evaluate um, to identify a good company? Also want to say hi to the audience. Hi Daniel, hi LinkedIn user. Anyway, it's all compliment for you, but anyway, keep going.
Okay.
So
So many different questions here. First, how do you build a business, let's say from Israel, that services, the global market? So, not to go too much geopolitical, but Israel has a very high concentration of startups. One out of every 1,400 people works for a startup here in Israel. It's crazy, crazy numbers. You have 27 miles in the center of Israel where, 400,000 people are employed just in startups. However, many of those technologies that are being developed in Israel are actually never launched in Israel. And I'm saying this particularly in fintech, where to be able to introduce a financial service requires many times licenses. And so because Israel is a small market and different language and so on, many times it's not worthwhile, unfortunately, for the founders to actually build the company for the local market. So to go back to your question, I think we have the habits and the ability to build great businesses that are global from the get-go. This is the DNA of what we do here in Israel. This is what most, if not almost all, founders have in mind when they start building a company. And what we see many times is that those companies are kind of dual, right? So you have a lot of the tech teams that are based here in Israel, just because there's so much, high quality talent in Israel of specifically technological talent. And many times the go-to-market teams are actually based in the US or in other places, depending on where the market of the company is. The great benefit of that, by the way, is that, if we go back to kind of the cultural differences, you kind of have that from the get-go. And so you build a company that's able to address those different cultures from inception, really. And definitely, we see this as a very kind of powerful capability to kind of bring to the market. When it comes to your question about, capital markets, innovation with VCs and LPs, I think, generally, if you kind of look back at the innovation, and this is kind of natural, a lot of the innovation in fintech was focused on the easier side and the easier places and the more obvious places. And as the industry evolves, you kind of, you start peeling the orange and start really kind of going deep into the more complex problems that you have in the industry. And so in that sense, I'm super excited about what's going to happen in wealth management and capital markets, because I think there's still a lot of room for innovation, a lot of inefficiencies there, a lot of new types of assets and trade that you want to be able to introduce. We see great startups that are kind of operating in that space. So definitely an exciting area.
Mm. I wonder, so like I want to be mindful of time. I definitely want to touch upon team A. So like when the size of the fintech team is about like 9 to 10 people, and you guys kind of select 2 companies or ideas per year to build. And I want to learn more about how do you you talk about like the general bigger trends, right? Like, so how do you select the 2 company after you segment them into, let's say, here's like the insurance tech, they're the fast growing company or whatever. Like, how do you kind of select the company or to put together?
Yeah. So first off, the fintech team in fact is slightly larger than that, because we have 2 sides of the house, right? The teammate capital, so the VC that invests in seed and A round companies, and then the venture creation side of the business that really kind of builds the businesses from scratch, which is the equivalent of the pre-seed and seed stages in a regular VC. And so we've built a Bible, and it's one that we kind of continuously try to improve. And to be able to choose 2 ideas a year, this means that we've researched dozens of ideas and we've killed dozens of opportunities. And I think it's a combination of kind of constantly talking to the market to kind of streamline that process as much as possible and start from the market needs. And we do so both in one-to-one conversations, but we also try to develop tools that help us kind of monitor the chatter in the net and kind of get smarter about what's happening, just using technology to surface some of the problems that businesses and individuals are experiencing in our domain. And then we kind of really kind of funnel this into our research methodology, which again, remember at this stage is there a big enough problem for me to solve? Question number 1. Question number 2, do we think that we can build a sustainable business out of that? right? Question number three, are we the right home for this business? There are a lot of great opportunities that we don't feel that we're the best position to really dramatically improve probability of success, and so we will not build those businesses. But where we have strong go-to-market access that we can bring to the founders, where we have deep understanding of a domain, where we think that there's a sense of urgency, something that's changing, that's creating a great opportunity. Those are the areas where we tend to kind of double down, and also just passion, right? You have to be passionate about what you do. So we've had times where we said, it's a great opportunity, but Jesus, I just don't want to do that. So, so
Um, how do you incubating the companies, and like what are the resources that you guys would provide for
yeah.
the portfolio?
So we like to reference this as somewhat of like a startup as a service, and we really have a robust team between our offices in New York and in Tel Aviv that support the companies from the business research team, which is absolutely amazing and helps size markets and understand different perspectives, to our BD and kind of go to market team that would generate hundreds of validation calls in the first couple of months to really make sure that we understand every side and every aspect of it. We are definitely very much what you call validation obsessed. To our marketing team that provides, product marketing to fine tune different messaging and support the launch of the company, and then, down the line, performance marketing and PR and everything that's needed. All the way to, I think, two additional very, very important capabilities. One is talent acquisition. So one of the biggest challenges that startups face in the early days are how do you get the very best talent to join you? And we do pride ourselves with having a very high percentage of referrals between our companies, and we've started creating somewhat of a network of employees that are moving from one company to another, then becoming founders and kind of part of the whole enchilada and the ecosystem, and it creates great, great, great value. So definitely in the executive hires and first early days employees, but also down the line, we help accelerate recruiting quite substantially. But we also have a team of tech researchers that would help crystallize, what should be the architecture of the solution, and would help, run the POCs and really support the founders in the early days, and down the line are very impactful in, high risk, high gain type of tasks and continuously support the companies. Finance as a service, strategic CFO support and so on. So, and that's obviously outside of just the domain expertise and kind of guidance in the company building journey and so on.
Totally. Okay, so I want to end with like a bigger question, and then we'll go into a 1 minute fire round, which is like, Israel is very famous for a lot of like big companies. Like, I really love Fiverr. I believe Fiverr is coming out of Israel. There's like Lemonade of the world. So a lot of like big companies are coming out of Israel. What are the qualities that make Israel founders successful? I know that we touch up this on this a little bit about like building a company to a global scale. That's like a really cool thing. And I wonder, like, besides like the strong technical talent, what are things that you feel like making the country startup ecosystem successful? And then what are some like trends or interesting things that you've seen as people starting out companies?
Sure. So I think a few things that are influencing this. One, it's the Israeli mentality of
Mhm.
when faced with not much natural resources, what can we do? We can use our brains and solve problems. And we've been doing so for as a country for many different aspects. And I think this tied with just a strong uh, benefit of the Israelis that are servicing in units like 8200, where they get a lot of training about technologies and then graduate the army and go and build companies to take this to the private market, is very, very substantial in just generating generations of super resourceful, creative problem solvers that have a very strong kind of tech affinity. And the combination of that, I think, creates a great kind of, innovation launchpad. I think we've, in the early days of the industry, tended to build technologies and sell them relatively quickly. And in the past, decade, we've seen some very big companies, some of which you've referenced, that have you know, that were born and stayed and went public and are still very substantial to this day. And so this many times is creating generations of founders that have been part of the journey in the early days, got a lot of training, and then are graduating to build their companies of their own. And also, I think there's more than 400 R&D centers in Israel of global companies. Those, at the end of the day, are the best schools. They train people. If I look at PayPal, a lot of companies, a lot of fintechs, Israeli fintechs, came out of employees that worked at PayPal here in Israel and kind of took this know-how, understood where the problems are, and launched it in the market.
Mm, totally. I like that you mentioned that, like, because of there's lack of natural resources, and then it kind of like force you to be resourceful. And I feel like that kind of speaks to the heart of like every entrepreneur around the globe who may not have a lot of like resources to, but you have to fight the incumbents to a degree. So I want to end with a 1 minute fire round for you. Number one is like, what's your favorite book?
Ooh, my favorite book would be Catcher in the Rye. It's a
uh
long.
Yeah. Who made the, and also it's a classic one. So like
Yeah.
who made the biggest impact in your career?
The biggest impact would be my mother.
Wait, what does she do? I mean, of course she's your mother. My mom is here with me too. So
It's just an example of how to never give up and believe in yourself. And I never see the limit. I believe I can do everything if I work hard enough. And so I think it's her gift to me. She gave me that, and I take it forward to my career.
um I wanted to learn a tiny bit of like how you grew up. I know that we don't have like a lot of time. I don't want to like block you. It's me blocking you from your dinner. But anyway, so what, like, I guess like how did you grow up, and then like what is she an entrepreneur?
No, not at all. She worked in fundraising for deprived children, so different, very different career. I think the one thing that impacted me most in my life was I'm French originally. I grew up there, and I moved to Israel when I was 9, and just the experience of being an immigrant, and kind of starting from scratch and seeing my parents, live great careers and financial stability to move to another country and kind of start again is something that branded me deeply, and gave me the confidence, you know, that I can really do anything, and I can, if I put my eyes on something, I can go ahead and grab it. It might not be easy. I will work very hard. Nothing came to me super easily in life necessarily, but with enough work and passion, you can really do anything.
Mm, I love that. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Elon Musk. I gotta understand that man.
Oh my God, he is popular on this show.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Where can we find you outside of work?
With my lovely children playing.
How old are they?
I have 3 kids, 7, 5, and 2.
Oh, that's amazing. I just have a 8-month-old. I feel like
Oh,
I'm already at max capacity of taking care of children. But anyway, thank you so much, Galia, for coming on the show today.
thank you, Grace. Appreciate it. It was fun.
I mean.